Hello, I'm Richard Jacobs, a professor of public administration at Villanova University, located 12 miles west of Independence Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At Villanova, I've taught leadership ethics for the past 25 years. This video's topic is an ethical dilemma, and in this video, I respond to the question, what is an ethical dilemma? So let's begin answering that question, shall we? An ethical dilemma is a situation wherein at least two goods, what ethicists call values, are in conflict, and each requires a different response. A more precise way to describe an ethical dilemma is a situation that requires a choice between options that are or appear to be equally unfavorable or mutually exclusive. An ethical dilemma then presents an individual, a human being whom ethicists call an agent, a difficult choice between two or more equally undesirable alternatives. This conflict can be as simple and straightforward as a person who makes conflicting promises and must choose one. And ethicists ask, what's the person to do? A conflict can be more complex. For example, when physicians and families agree that human life shouldn't be prolonged and that unpreventable pain shouldn't be tolerated, ethicists ask, just when should life support be withdrawn? The conflict can also be very complex, as the French existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre noted when he related the story of a student whose brother had been killed during the German offensive of 1940. The student desired with all his heart to avenge his brother's death and to fight the forces he regarded as the incarnation of evil. But the student happened to be living with his widowed mother, and he was her sole consolation in life. This situation was an ethical dilemma, in that the student was torn between two goods. The first good was of limited scope, but also of certain efficacy, that is, personal devotion to his widowed mother. And the second good was of wider scope, but uncertain efficacy, that is, offering one's service to the nation in an attempt to contribute to the defeat of an unjust aggressor. The crucial element of an ethical dilemma is that an agent can and ought to perform each action, but the agent can't perform both or all of the actions, or as ethicists would say, at least two options that are or appear to be equally unfavorable or mutually exclusive, or as non-ethicists might say, you can't have your cake and eat it too. Thus, the agent appears to be condemned to ethical failure on at least one count, because no matter what course of conduct the agent selects, the individual won't do what virtue requires, namely, the agent will fail to do something the agent ought to do. However, when one of the ethical requirements overrides another, there is no guarantee that the ethical dilemma is genuine. So in addition to what's already been stated, in a genuine ethical dilemma, it must also be the case that none of the other conflicting goods can be overturned. Sartre's story about the student is instructive in this regard. If the student was certain that he would make a difference in defeating the Germans, then the obligation to join the military would prevail. But if the student would make little or no difference whatsoever in the cause of the French, then his obligation to tend to his widowed mother's needs would take precedence, since he is virtually certain to be helpful there. Some ethicists argue that solving a dilemma should involve arranging the resolutions to the conflict of goods hierarchically, however many goods there might be. In this scheme, the highest ordered resolution always prevails. The second prevails unless it conflicts with the first, and so forth. However, this scheme is problematic, and on at least two counts. First, it's not credible to assert that goods and the conduct they require on the part of an agent can be so neatly ordered. For example, keeping one's promises and not harming others clearly can conflict. But it's not all that clear that one of these resolutions should always prevail over the other. Second, if it was possible to arrange goods and the conduct they require on the part of agents hierarchically, it's entirely possible that the same good and resolution can give rise to conflicting obligations, what ethicists call symmetrical cases. If you've read William Styron's novel Sophie's Choice, or seen the screenplay, a mother whose name is Sophie and her 2 children are interred in a Nazi concentration camp. A guard informs Sophie that one child will be killed and the other allowed to live. Yes, Sophie's decision will save the life of the child, but only by condemning the other to death. But the guard further complicates the context, informing Sophie that if she chooses neither child, then both will be killed. The crucial piece of information provides Sophie an ethically compelling reason to choose one child. Yet Sophie has equally compelling reasons to choose to save both sons. Thus, the good of preserving human life, how's it possible for anyone, not just a mother, to quantify the value of the life of each son, gives rise to an authentic ethical dilemma. For public administrators, ethical dilemmas present 2 questions. What ought I to do, and why ought I to do it? It's quite likely that different public administrators will select different resolutions to the ethical dilemmas arising in their professional practice, depending upon the situation, their intentions, and the circumstances. So in the end, it's because of this characteristic, as some ethicists have argued, that ethical theory shouldn't allow for the possibility of a dilemma. Of course, that falsely assumes there exists only one choice concerning what ought to be done. In answer to the question, what is an ethical dilemma? While it would be easier to make determinations were there only one choice, in administrative practice that simply isn't the case. Or there wouldn't be an ethical dilemma requiring a public administrator to identify a virtuous resolution.